The vastness of the Montana Territory stretched out beneath a restless summer sky. It was late July of 1865, and the land lay hushed, holding its breath as though it knew something unseen stirred just beyond the ridges and rivers. The air was hot and sharp with the scent of dust and pine, the wind carrying with it both promise and threat. Sterling Morn stepped carefully across the uneven ground, the weight of his decision pressing heavily against his chest. He had crossed a threshold from which there would be no return, and now every step felt both fragile and fated. His mind moved like a slow river, circling around the same thought, the same image, a pair of dark eyes, deep as night, watching him with a mixture of trust and sorrow. He did not hear them before he saw them. The warriors emerged from the tree line like shadows come to life, their presence sudden, overwhelming. One became 3, then 10, then 70, silent figures astride painted horses, their bodies tall and proud, their gazes sharp as arrows. They circled him without sound, without haste, the earth trembling beneath the thunder of hooves. Sterling felt his breath catch, his throat dry as dust. He was alone, and they were many. Feathers adorned their hair, white against the black of their braids, catching the sunlight so that for an instant they seemed like spirits rather than men. Their faces were painted with solemn purpose, streaks of red and black carved across cheekbones like symbols of judgment. Sterling did not move. The leader of the warriors dismounted, his steps measured and deliberate. He stood tall, his eyes steady, unreadable, as though he looked not just at the man before him but through him, into every hidden place Sterling had carried across the miles. With a slow, reverent motion, the chief reached into a pouch at his side and withdrew a single white feather. The feather drifted between them like a fragile truth. Sterling's heart pounded. He knew what the feather meant. White was purity, truth, honor. It was a question as much as it was a sign. Why have you come here? Do you stand in honesty, or do you bring betrayal? The circle of warriors tightened, the silence around him growing thick, suffocating. Their eyes were upon him, 70 pairs of eyes, demanding his answer not in words but in the weight of his spirit. Memories rose unbidden, her voice soft against the night, her hand brushing his cheek, her plea whispered into his soul. He had chosen her, chosen the path that led him here. And now the path had teeth. Sterling swallowed hard, his hand trembling at his side, but he did not reach for his weapon. To do so would have meant death. Instead, he bowed his head, a gesture of both respect and surrender. "I come not in deceit," he said quietly, his voice steady though his chest burned. "I come because of her." The words were carried away on the wind, yet they seemed to settle among the warriors like stones cast into still water. The chief studied him in silence, the feather still held between his fingers, its whiteness stark against the sun-darkened lines of his hand. For a moment, just a moment, the land itself seemed to hold still. Then, without a word, the chief placed the feather at Sterling's feet. A test had begun. Night in the Montana Territory carried its own kind of weight. The stars burned sharp and unyielding in the sky, scattered across the dark canvas like watchful eyes. Sterling Morn lay awake beneath them, his head resting against his saddle, the fire beside him little more than a bed of glowing embers. Sleep would not come, not when the past pressed against him so fiercely. Her face rose before him as clear as if she were still there, leaning close, her breath warm against his cheek. Ayanna. She had not come to him as a stranger. She had come like a storm, sudden and undeniable, a force he could not resist. The first time he had seen her, she stood by the river, her dark hair loose in the wind, her feet bare upon the rocks. She turned, and her eyes met his, and in that instant, he knew his life had shifted course. Yet it was not beauty alone that bound him. It was her spirit, fierce and unyielding. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who knew her worth, and still, there was gentleness in her laughter, a lightness that warmed even the heaviest days. He remembered the night she had pressed the small carved horse into his palm. Her hands had lingered over his, her gaze steady, solemn. "This is more than wood," she had said softly. "It is choice." He had stared at the carving, the little horse smooth and worn from her touch, and felt the weight of what she asked of him. For to take it meant not just affection but allegiance. To take it meant he must step into her world, accept her people, accept her trials. "I give you this," she had continued, "because my heart trusts you. But the path ahead will demand more than trust. It will demand courage." And he had taken it, not because he was blind, but because he could not imagine turning away. Now, lying beneath the stars, the memory burned like fire in his chest. His fingers brushed the pouch at his side where the carved horse still rested, worn smooth from the journey. He thought of Ayana's eyes when she had given it to him, hopeful, but shadowed with the knowledge of what might come. Her people did not give lightly. Their laws were as old as the mountains, as binding as blood. To love her meant to stand before them and be judged. And he knew that judgment was near. The image of the white feather returned to him, stark and demanding. He had been marked. He had been seen. And soon, he would have to answer not just to Ayana's heart, but to the 70 warriors who circled like shadows at the edge of his fate. The fire cracked softly, a spark leaping into the night. Sterling closed his eyes, but sleep did not come. Only the echo of her voice, the weight of her gift, and the certainty that his life would never again belong solely to himself. Dawn came quietly, pale light creeping over the ridges and spilling into the valley like a secret revealed. Sterling rose with it, his body stiff from the hard ground, his mind heavy with the memories that had haunted him through the night. The carved horse still rested in his pouch, close to his heart, its weight both a comfort and a burden. The land seemed different now, as though it too was watching him. Every bird call, every rustle of leaves carried meaning, every shadow a warning. He mounted his horse and followed the faint trail that wound toward the Apache village, each step drawing him deeper into a fate he could no longer turn from. When he reached the crest of a hill, he saw them. The village lay spread across the valley floor, framed by the river's bend and the tall cottonwoods that swayed in the morning breeze. Smoke rose from the lodges, curling into the sky in thin gray streams. Women moved among the fires, their voices soft, while children darted through the grass with laughter like bright arrows. Yet even from this distance, Sterling felt the weight of eyes upon him. He urged his horse forward, his pulse quickening. By the time he reached the edge of the village, they were waiting. Warriors stood in a line, unmoving, their faces painted, their spears tipped with stone that glinted cold in the light. Among them was the chief he had seen before, tall and solemn, the white feather braided into his hair like a silent judgment. Sterling dismounted slowly, his hands open at his sides. He had no weapon drawn, no deceit in his bearing. He walked forward, every step deliberate, until he stood before the line of men. The chief spoke, his voice low and even, yet carrying the force of a hammer. "You have come." Sterling inclined his head. "I have." The chief's gaze was unyielding. "Do you understand what it means? To stand here is not to visit. It is to submit. Our laws are not yours to question. If you seek one of ours, you seek all of us. You will be judged by the old ways." Sterling's throat tightened, but his voice did not waver. "I understand." The warriors murmured, their eyes narrowing, but the chief silenced them with a single raised hand. He stepped closer, close enough that Sterling could see the deep lines carved into his face, the years of weight carried there. "You have been chosen," the chief said, the words heavy with meaning. "Do you know why?" Sterling hesitated only a moment. His fingers brushed the pouch at his side. "Because of Ayana." The chief's gaze flickered, not with surprise but with recognition, as if he had expected no other answer. "There is more than her heart at stake," the chief said. "There is her blood, her people, her honor. If you would take her into your life, you must prove yourself before all. Not just to me. Not just to her. To every spirit that walks with us." Sterling drew a slow breath. Then tell me what must be done. The chief turned, his voice carrying so that all could hear. There will be trials. Not of strength alone, for strength fades. Not of words, for words are wind. You will be tested in truth. You will be tested in sacrifice. And when the time comes, you will face a choice that no man wishes to face. The murmurs rose again, louder this time, filled with both skepticism and curiosity. But Sterling did not flinch. He had come this far. He would not turn back. The chief studied him a long moment, then gave a single nod. So it begins. The village gathered at dusk, the air thick with anticipation. Fires burned low, their flames licking upward and casting long shadows that danced across painted faces. Children sat cross-legged at the edges, silent for once, their eyes wide. The warriors formed a circle, their presence heavy, their judgment sharper than any blade. Sterling stood in the center, alone. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, but beneath that calm his heart thundered. He could feel the eyes of 70 men upon him, the memory of Iana's gaze pressing just as fiercely. The carved horse in his pouch felt like a stone now, heavy enough to drag him under. The chief stepped forward, his feather catching the firelight. His voice was deep, resonant, each word a weight laid upon Sterling's shoulders. The first trial is truth. You stand before us not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as a man who seeks to bind his life to one of ours. If there is falsehood in your heart, the spirits will see it. If you speak without honor, your words will turn to ash. A murmur rippled through the circle. The chief's gaze fixed on Sterling. Why are you here? Speak plain, and let every ear hear you. Sterling drew a slow breath, his throat dry as the desert wind. He could feel the pull of silence, the temptation to hide behind half-truths. But he knew what this moment demanded. He lifted his head, his voice steady, carrying through the stillness. I came because of Iana, he said. Not because I sought her beauty, though she is beautiful. Not because I sought her people, though I honor them. I came because she saw me when I was lost. She gave me a gift that no one else had ever given, trust. She placed her heart in my hands, and I could not turn away. I stand here not to take her from you, but to prove that I am worthy to stand beside her. The words hung in the air, carried by the smoke of the fires. The warriors watched him without moving, their expressions carved from stone. Some narrowed their eyes, some exchanged glances, but none spoke. The chief stepped closer, his voice sharp. And what of the blood that will follow? Do you think of children? Of lineage? Do you think of the burden you place upon her if you fail? Sterling's jaw tightened. I have thought of it every day. If I fail, it is not just I who will suffer. That is why I will not fail. A silence stretched, heavy, endless. Then the chief turned and lifted his hand. The first trial is past. A breath Sterling had not realized he was holding escaped him. A murmur ran through the circle, approval from some, doubt from others. But the chief's face remained unreadable. He spoke again, his words falling like stones into still water. The second trial will not be of words. It will be of sacrifice. Tomorrow, when the sun stands high, you will face it. And in that moment, you will learn if your heart is strong enough to endure. The fire crackled, sending sparks upward into the night. Sterling bowed his head, not in defeat but in readiness. He knew the worst was yet to come. The sun climbed slowly, merciless in its heat, until it stood high above the valley. The Apache gathered once more, a great circle of watchers around the open ground. The warriors stood tall and silent, women held their children close, and even the smallest among them knew that what would unfold was no simple contest. It was judgment. Sterling walked to the center of the circle, the weight of every step pressing like stone. He had not slept. His body was weary, but his spirit burned with a fire he could not extinguish. The carved horse in his pouch rested against his chest, Iana's gift, Iana's trust. It reminded him of why he had come, and what he could not afford to lose. The chief stood opposite him, the white feather gleaming in his hair, his face solemn. He lifted his hand, and the murmurs around the circle stilled. "The second trial begins," he said, his voice deep and steady. "This is not a test of words, nor of strength alone. It is the test of sacrifice. For to claim one of ours, you must give what is most precious. You must face pain without flinching and loss without breaking. Only then will we know if your spirit holds true." 2 warriors stepped forward, carrying between them a shallow clay bowl filled with sharpened stones and burning coals. The heat shimmered, the air rippling around it. Sterling's breath caught. He understood. The chief gestured. "You will place your hand upon it. You will hold it until the spirits are satisfied. If you falter, if you withdraw, you fail. If you endure, you prove your heart." A hush fell over the village. Even the wind seemed to still. Sterling stepped forward. His mind reeled with the instinct to resist, to turn away, but his feet carried him on. He thought of Ayana's eyes, dark and steadfast. He thought of her words, "This is choice." He lowered his hand. The heat struck him instantly, a searing agony that lanced up his arm and into his chest. The stones bit into his skin, the coals burned through flesh, and for a moment the world went white with pain. His body screamed to pull away, to end it, but he held firm. His teeth ground together, sweat streaming down his face, his muscles trembling as the fire tore at him. Voices rose around him, murmurs, shouts, disbelief. Some called for him to release, others urged him to endure. But Sterling heard none of it. He heard only her voice, soft as the river, fierce as the storm. Trust. Courage. The pain deepened, the smell of burning flesh rising. His vision blurred. Darkness pressed at the edges. Still he did not move. At last, the chief raised his hand. Enough. Warriors rushed forward, pulling his hand free, the skin charred and ruined. Sterling swayed, his knees nearly buckling, but he stood. He stood because to fall would mean defeat, and he had not endured this to be broken at the end. The chief studied him long, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he gave a single nod. "The second trial is past." The circle erupted, some in anger, some in awe. Sterling swayed on his feet, the pain consuming him, but inside, his heart surged with fierce relief. Ayana came to him then, breaking through the line of warriors. She touched his arm, her eyes wide with fear and pride all at once. "You should not have." "I had to," he whispered, his voice raw. "For you." Her hand trembled against his chest, but her gaze did not falter. "Then you are mine, and I am yours." The chief raised his hand once more, his voice carrying above the clamor. "The trials are complete. By endurance, by truth, by sacrifice, this man has proven himself. From this day forward, he walks not as an outsider, but as one of us." A great silence followed, heavy with meaning. Then, slowly, the circle broke. Warriors lowered their spears. Children ran forward. The village shifted, accepting him not as a stranger, but as a brother. Sterling's burned hand throbbed with every heartbeat, yet the pain seemed distant now, insignificant beside the joy that rose in his chest. Ayana's fingers laced through his uninjured hand, her strength flowing into him. He had come through fire and judgment. He had given all that was asked, and he had won more than acceptance. He had won a life, a love, a place where he belonged. For the first time, Sterling Morn felt whole.